A very warm welcome to this panel at Carla 2020. I'm very happy here today to share the room with two sister organizations, WIFT Germany and ProQuote Film Germany. And Nicole Ackermann, the chair of WIFT Germany, and Barbara Rohm, chair of ProQuote. They will then introduce the rest of the panelists. Before I start, I would like to read a value statement for Carla 2020. I declare that I do not and will not condone any forms of discrimination by myself or perpetrated by others on the basis of an ethnicity, religion, geographical origin, skin color, religious beliefs, sexuality, gender identity, socioeconomic class, disability, or age. I equally declare that I do not and will not tolerate sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, ableism, fascism, and any other ism. This is an ism-free conference. We have a very wide panel today, but it has its reason. And I'm happy to give the word to Barbara and Nicole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this panel at Carla 2020 today. It's a joy and honor to be here with you. And I'm especially happy that Carla is happening despite the current global pandemic. So we are here in the digital world. I'm Nicole Ackermann, economist and serial entrepreneur along the value chain of film, including theatrical exhibition, production, and distribution. I'm a member of the board of WIFT International and chairwoman of WIFT Germany. So the headline for this panel today is Bringing Movement in the Movement. And this conversation brings together researchers on gender and structures, decision makers from the film and TV landscape, and activists from our industry. And we will create a space for reflection on the industry's status and next steps regarding the empowerment of women, as well as the removal of structural barriers and exclusions. And in particular, the participants here will explore the role that the institutions in Germany's filmic ecosystem can play as a catalyst for continued and sustainable progress. Before I'll be introducing our special guests for this panel, I am now giving the floor to my co-host and your colleague, Barbara Rohm, chairwoman of ProQuote Film in Germany. Barbara.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Helene and WIFT International for the invitation to this cooperation and this inspiring Congress. And thank you, Nicole, for the cooperation with WIFT Germany, the first we have, and I very much hope that more will follow. And now I give a short introduction of the work of ProQuote Film. ProQuote Film is the voice of creative people in Germany who want to work in an industry which is gender equal, diverse, and innovative. All trades plus the actresses working on the film development process united under our roof. And we see ourselves as a political organization that works with public events, actions, and campaigns. We have two huge challenges to face. On the one hand, we are conducting a labor dispute behind the camera because the downside of unequally distributed power is the gender pay gap, sexual harassment and violence, no confidence in the professionalism of women, and the threat of poverty in old age. And on the other hand, we work for cultural change in front of the camera because the visual language of the media reflects the situation of any given society. The images shape our values and ideals. They provide models for social and cultural behavior, especially for young people. Since film has that power to shape reality and change consciousness, it is fatal when women's perspectives hardly ever occur. By eliminating actresses aged 30 and over from screen and by withholding the diversity of our population, the film industry is creating distorted images of our world when it could really create progress. By telling the hero's narrative through and by men, the history of mankind is continuously written without acknowledging the impact of women, what they have and they always had on the world. So our main goal is more women in front of and behind the camera to present women's stories, their perspectives and their artistic output. ProQuote Film still and again challenges broadcasters, founders, educators and festivals to raise the proportion of women in film to 50% by quotas, because the quota ensures fair competition, which is currently distorted. ProQuote Film challenges politics to act. ProQuote Film challenges the dominant gender stereotypes of the media and initiates public debate of their content. 12 women founded ProQuote Film in 2014. In the beginning, there were no data at all, but there was a gut feeling that something went wrong. We set off with a sense of not being appreciated, not getting as much work as our male colleagues, and often seeing our careers stagnate while male counterparts overtake us for no obvious reason. And there was a review by a female journalist. She showed that only a fraction of film funding goes to projects by women. We initially found her data hard to believe, and we started to count for half a year on our own. And this is what we found. 90% of all television films in Germany were made by men. Only 10% of film funding money went into projects of women, and that also since 20 years, half of the graduates of film schools are female. What really shocked us was because of the lack of gender monitoring, women could not see the structural discrimination. That's why all of us thought that it only happened at an individual level or was a personal failure, that one maybe was not good enough or has to try harder. The most important experience we all made is, it's not me, it's in the system. And now we can take a closer look at the German film industry, because today the database is there, which is a great success for us. And we see that sexism is embedded in the structures like everywhere in the world. The study of the Federal Film Funding Institution and the public broadcasters questions why the entire pool of female talent that is available as a potential for the market is not being used. And above all, it is risk aversion and discouragement of male and female decision makers, but also the still prevailing stereotypes and male connotated job profiles. Risk aversion means that male and female decision makers prefer to work with those male and female filmmakers and promote those substances, genres, manuscripts, and tonalities that pose them to the least risk. One promotes what seems to have already proven itself. One avoids new types of forms, other conflicts, ensembles, and tonalities, and also accepts the danger of repeating oneself over and over again. Stereotyping means that there are still many prejudices that connotate the profession of directing as male, and that women are priori ascribed to the fact that they cannot assert themselves as well as men. And women are predominantly associated with the characteristics that clear them unsuitable for key positions, while men are more likely to be associated with attributes relevant to success. The study clearly shows that the exclusion of women restricts creative and artistic freedom, creating a completely distorted competition for funding, and makes clear how deeply rooted these prejudices are in the industry. Other studies show that films by women are more often awarded film prizes and run much more successfully at festivals. But on average, male producers in the feature film sector work with almost twice as much money as female producers. Female directors are much more efficient with their film funding euros than male directors. If a woman directs, she would need an average of 13 euro of subsidies to lure a moviegoer into the cinema. A male director would need almost 3 times as much. He needs 41 euros. Same picture when we look to female and male producers. Added to this fact that female directors show almost twice as many female characters in their films as male directors. So the different studies also show that women suffer more from the precarious work situation faced by freelancers and independent employees in the film industry. Women freelancers earn significantly less than male freelancers, and that is one of the reasons why they are more threatened by poverty in old age. The gender pay gap is the highest in the cultural sector than in other areas. And this is why now we are seeing a huge backlash starting because of the Corona crisis. To sum up, it is all about structure, money and power, and about culture. And it's not about women who have to try harder or to create more quality. Outdated structures, not enough women in leadership positions, and the attribution of stereotypes prevent equal access and fair competition. The result is that female makers have limited access to film funding, and this is the main thing we have to change. Women must have access to film funding because the fair distribution of society's resources must be the quintessential aspiration of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Yeah, before I'll give you all a perspective from WIFT Germany and invite you all to reflect on this topic, I would like to introduce who is with us today. First of all, I'd like to say here's Mariette Rissenbeek. She's Executive Director and co-head of the Berlin International Film Festival. Beyond that, she brings extensive industry knowledge from her work in production and distribution and from leading the Institution for Promoting German Cinema worldwide for many years before her current role at Berlinale. Welcome, Mariette.
Hello, welcome.
We also have Margrit Staerk. She's founding member of the Seastar Award for female directors in Germany. She's also a veteran acquisitions and co-production executive, has exhaustive experience in co-producing and buying feature films and TV series around the globe, and has been director of acquisitions at CDF Enterprises for many years now. Welcome, Margrit.
Hi. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We also have with us today Karin Heisecke. She has an academic background in social sciences, has been an advocate for gender justice for more than 2 decades, and is currently director of Malisa Foundation since its creation a couple of years ago in 2016 by German actor and producer Maria Furtwängler and her daughter Elisabeth Furtwängler. The foundation promotes social diversity and works to end gender-biased discrimination with a strong focus on gender representation on screen. Welcome, Karin. Last but not least, we have with us Anna Wahl, who holds a chair as Professor for Gender, Organization and Management at the Department of Industrial Economics and Management at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. Professor Anna Wahl is a pioneer in research on gender and organizational structures. Her main research areas of interest are power relations in organizations related to processes of change and resistance, constructions of masculinities, women's survival strategies, and gendered organizational cultures. The groundbreaking textbook by her research group Phosphor is titled It Will Be in Order and was published in 2001 already. It has by then translated to several languages and has been used at a number of universities in Sweden and in many management development programs. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
So I'll proceed and give you a quick perspective on the issue from WIFT Germany. So as an economist, I'm strongly interested in structural correlations and cause-effect chains. And one of the main goals of our WIFT network is to provide women across our industry with increased visibility and to include their valuable insights and experiences from their work environments in our initiatives to impact change. And from an economic point of view, our work is based on several studies that decisions by diverse and gender equal teams lead to increased corporate success. So this applies to organizations and with that to film projects too. Not long ago, this all-female panel today would have been considered as quite unusual. All these amazing women here represent leadership positions in different fields of our industry. And this is a great accomplishment. Still, this panel is not diverse. That's an additional challenge. Also, our industry at all doesn't reflect our society's gender balance or diversity. Even though there is economical reasons, as mentioned before, even though there are social reasons, as especially our industry has a social responsibility and unique role model function, because society is profoundly conditioned by what it sees on screen. The stories we tell have an important impact on what our audience perceives as possible for their own lives. Therefore, it's essential who is included in creating these stories, both in front and behind the cameras, and who is included in the decision if and how these stories are being made, released, screened, or broadcast. Even though Article 3 of Germany's basic law guarantees equality before the law, equality of the sexes, and prohibits discrimination and preferential treatment based on certain characteristics, this is the right of equality. But still, there is no equality in our industry. No matter if it's regarding pay, the size of film budgets, or representation on the big or small screen, and so on. Change is happening, we can all see that, but the ongoing change is happening very slowly. So why is that? Because it's a structural problem. This is why structural change is so important. And adding to the complexity of the scenario is the fact that films are considered as art for the audience's inspiration, as well as consumer products which are up for sale. So it's really complex. So I'm eager to see what we can achieve today with our joint reflection from different perspectives in order to make further change happen and maybe even accelerate it. Thank you for your attention. So I would like to start and invite you to reflect on the fact that change is happening so slowly in this industry. So from your personal perspective, no matter what your organization is, what your experience is, it would be really great if you could give us a little bit insight from your experiences and your daily work. So Mariette, would you like to start?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nicole. First of all, within the Berlinale team, gender equality is actually very good. We have a lot of sections and departments which are led by a woman. So the gender theme within the Berlinale is positive. At the same time, within the program, the festival program, of course, we're still working on getting a bigger gender equality. I think part of the problem, let's call it a problem, is of course that not 50% of the films submitted are made by women. So you have to do a lot of extra work to make sure you reach out to those films made by women, which are about 1/3 of the total submissions, and try to improve the balance and to get more films from women in the program than the number of submissions would normally lead up to. As the festival committee, which consists of 6 people, has 4 women within the committee since 1 year, I do hope that for the next year there would be an improvement possible, and that there is more sensitivity for the issue, and that the selection committee also is more into looking at films made by women. At the same time, as you say, it's not only about gender equality, it's also about diversity, which has been a very important element for the Berlinale since the beginning. Diversity in society, diversity in the world. Also here, I think we have to look more closely to films made outside of Europe or outside of white countries to see what the countries have to offer. At the same time, the World Cinema Fund very clearly supports films from countries which don't have a traditional subsidy system or a traditional production structure, and that's very, very specifically looking at countries which are very diverse, and it does also improve the number of films which could be submitted to the Berlinale. From my previous work, as you know, I worked for German films. We represented German films around the world. It was very clear that very few female directors have a steady career. You see that a man very often every 2 or 3 or 4 years makes a film. Women very often need much more time in between the films, which makes it more difficult for them to really establish themselves as a director and get their name known. So that would be my first thought to your question.
Thank you very much, Mariette. Margrit, would you like to give us your
Yes. Yeah, well, the interesting thing with Seastar is that the first idea is quite old. Seastar is the Women's Prize of the Mainz division of the Optimist International, which is a women's organization. And first, I think it was maybe 2000 something, there was the idea that we want to have Women's Prize, but at that time, only a few of our Mainz division have been in that field. And then we convinced that Claudia Tronier from Das kleine Fernsehspiel, a division of ZDF, which is very famous for working with young directors and has reached a kind of nearly 50% percentage of female directors. She is now with, since a few years, with our Mainz division of The Optimist, and then others came as well. And then it was clear that we could try to organize it. The difficulty is everybody from us is full-time working. We have children, we have everything around us, and maybe as the directors, you try to struggle and find a solution. And then in 2014, there was the idea, and we talked to our governor, Malu Dreyer, and she said, it's a great idea, but it's a lot of work. And she was not sure whether we can do everything. And she was very positive, but she said at the same time that she couldn't give us any money. So we had to arrange everything by our own. And then the first 2015, the organization was set. And 2016, our first event was with ProQuote. At that time, it called ProQuote Regie. And it was a great speech of Tatjana Toransky. And then we do it every 2 years. And then 2016, there was a wonderful thing of Yasmin Tabatabai explaining what did we reach and what not. And in this year, we had Professor Elisabeth Prommer in our podium, and it was very great to have all the numbers. So we tried to focus only on female directors. Everybody from us is a female because it's a women's organization, and the organization who is financing it, they are not from our field. They are judges, they are virologists, they are everything, and they are a part of the financing. So we first asked everybody from Rhineland-Pfalz to contribute, and now we have others to come as well. And it was the idea that we want to have a prize which has a certain amount of money, because only say wonderful directors and you don't receive anything besides the nice trophy you see behind me, which was not enough. So the first prize is 10,000 euro. And then was the idea that we need additional prizes, and then the clubs of Berlin and Potsdam joined, and they have a prize, and everything is organized by us. And usually there is always somebody from ProQuote, there's a WIFT member there at our events, and we finance everything on our own. And our goal is to promote female directors working and living in Germany. We don't ask what passport they have. For example, one of our great directors this year was Carolina Helsgaard. And I think Esti Amrami maybe is German or Israeli or both. So we actively make lists and go to theatrical distributors. The good thing is that Claudia Tronier, which is a part of our Seastar team, has a good network. My colleague Susanne Becker is coming from a field of documentary. So I think the great thing is I'm learning a lot. I'm learning something about documentaries, which I didn't know. I'm learning something about the numbers from ProQuote. So, and I think for me, the main thing was that there are so many different views and there are so many great women working together. And I'm always very happy that I'm meeting them, and I try to bring that positive energy to the network and to enterprises. And okay, sometimes people say, yes, I know, you are always asking, is this and that production can be that made by a female director? Says, yes, yes. And if that makes me difficult, I'm proud to be difficult. That's it. But I think it's very positive, and I learn a lot, and I'm happy that we are looking for new directors this year. Now we have a few coming to us, but in the first years it was all us going to the female directors and asking them, ask theatrical distributors, is there something, and explaining what we are doing, and explaining that you can use the 10,000 euro for a production, but you can use it for yourself as well. We don't make any things that it has to be used for a production. And that's for me very positive. And I'm learning a lot, I think, for my work at ZDF Enterprises and at the network.
Thank you very much, Margrit. So Karin, may I ask you, you have been in this field of gender studies for quite a while, and what's your experience and what do you think are the big obstacles and that make the process so slow?
Yes, I've been in the field more of gender practice and policy than studies. The question, why is change happening so slowly in the film, TV, audiovisual industry? In a way, it's really reflecting what's happening in society in general with regard to progress towards gender equality and overall equity, diversity, and inclusion. And my experience working in different fields in this context actually shows that the mechanisms are pretty similar, whatever industry or whatever sector you're looking at. And I'm sure that Anna Wahl will talk about this from an academic perspective. So with regard to the audiovisual industry in Germany, when we started our work, a lot of important groundwork had been done already by ProQuote Film with regard to the kind of behind the camera, the off-screen perspective with regard to women working in the industry and the opportunities that they get. And we focused on gender representation on screen, where at the time we didn't have any recent data on this. There had been studies, like one study 1 decade earlier, another one 2 decades earlier, but there hadn't been a comprehensive overview of the gender representation in German film and TV up to that point. And so there was basically the situation where we didn't actually know what we were talking about. And if, this saying, what's not counted doesn't count, I find very true. Like if there's not even enough interest to look at what is the status quo, what is the situation we are facing right now, if there's not even an interest in doing that, and then looking at that, then how could we possibly identify solutions to get out of that situation? So this was the first step. And this had happened already in other countries, but not yet in Germany. So back in 2016, the first comprehensive study was done by the University of Rostock, and we partnered for that with the big TV, the big broadcasting companies, both public and private in Germany, and with film funding institutions to enable this big study. And the results, Barbara Rohm already spoke about the findings. The results were not that different from other countries, that women are underrepresented, that other genders are severely underrepresented, that like non-binary, for instance. And that also the type of representation, not only the number, kind of the percentage of representation, but also the type of representation was quite stereotyped. So the way women and girls were represented, or female characters were represented, was a relatively narrow kind of scope compared to the way men were represented, both with regard to age, with regard to the kind of characteristics, the types of roles, etc. So yeah, we have the data in Germany. We have, thanks to ProQuote firm, a lot of data around the issues, the off-screen issues. We now have the data on the on-screen issues. What we did then is that we looked what could be the solutions. And there's already also in different countries, there's already lots of things that have been tried and tested and where we know what actually works. So now, right now, we are in a situation in Germany where we know what the situation is. We also know what can be done about it because we have examples of what has worked in other countries. And so now what needs to happen is that the people in the decision-making positions basically have to start to act. It's in a way, you know, it's simple. It's one of these things, I know it's simple, but it's not easy. But we do have the knowledge. Now we can move towards implementation. And the issue of why people are so resistant to change, this is something which in a way is kind of understandable because it's quite human. Humans tend to be resistant to change and be risk averse, as Barbara mentioned before as well, especially in the film and TV industry. But the thing is, do we want to remain in the status quo, which is not reflecting the society and which is not giving equal opportunities to everyone, or do we want to move forward? Do we want to arrive in the 21st century?
Yeah, thank you very much. So in the first studies, there were like the studies, and they were very clear about the status quo, but there was no, at the end of the study of the report, there was no call to action. So Anna, in your experience, what has been crucial steps for change in Sweden to really make a difference?
Well, all of what you have been talking about, I think, is valid also for the Swedish case and the Swedish situation. I mean, my role as a sort of academic or researcher into organization and gender was first to talk about, I mean, it's understanding inequality. That is sort of the first step, and understanding inequality, what it is, and then you sort of often what we did in Sweden was a lot to start off with the ones that experienced the problem already, let's say the women in film that were sort of in the minority position. And as we also know from research, it's very common that women that are, I mean, in a minority, in a tough situation, they tend to try to adapt and survive, of course, instead of trying to change the structures. So I think that was a big step in Sweden to try to broaden this understanding of inequality to women in film, to understand that it's not only to try to survive yourself, even if that is more than enough, but to understand that maybe if we cooperate in changing the structures and the terms under which film is being done, then maybe you also will experience that would help you as an individual woman or a director or filmmaker, whatever. So I think that was the first step to sort of broaden this kind of awareness. But of course, it's not enough. The resistance is among all the others. And it's also very clear from research that all kinds of programs that raise awareness also raise the feelings of frustration, because the more aware you become, the more you see the problem, but you also see that nothing is being done and others do not understand, or they still talk about women as sort of lacking a lot of things. They don't understand, they don't have the guts to do, etc., etc. So I think it's also important to understand the kind of frustration that this kind of raised awareness also creates, and sort of take care of that, because so that is one thing. So then all the others, a lot of them, of course, are men in film, and how do we work with men in film, and how can we broaden this understanding of what you have been talking about, that it's about structures. It's not about the women being a specific way. It's about structures and it's about power. And a lot of men are in power positions, and then this is the part that is also tricky, because this is why it takes so long. Because if you try to send a message through about change and the receivers do not share your understanding about the problem, then there's this kind of miscommunication and raised frustration, etc. And if we have a power perspective, we can also understand this. If you are in a power position, you want to keep the understanding of that women are lacking or they are not good enough and we should support them, etc. Instead of understanding that it's something that I do wrong. It's something that I have a privilege. I mean, privilege is very, very painful to see in your own situation, as you'll be talking also about us being white here, etc., etc. It's always this kind of pain in understanding that you have privilege in different situations. And this is the situation I think is in film, as I totally agree with Karin, as in many other industries. Film is not specific in this respect, I would say. It's very, very common, and you can see a lot of these structures and resistance in parallel in other kind of industries and organizations. But so working for change is also to try to communicate this understanding of inequality. And that is, of course, takes a lot of time, resources, and if it's not being prioritized on the agenda in normal film situations, it will be all the struggle to sort of put it on the agenda. So, of course, what you have talked about also, Maria and Margrit, to put it on the agenda in all these sort of general situations where the whole film industry is very important, but it's a struggle. And I don't see, there's no easy way. There's not, I couldn't share with you, 10 points that you should do. It's not easy. And as change happens, also the resistance change. So there might come, what we could see in Sweden is also these kind of opinions around that men are being discriminated against, or that I was born with the wrong sex and now I could never get funding because it's only for women, etc. So all these things happen at the same time. So I don't know if that was a good answer, Nicole. But,
Barbara, want to
Yes, hello, Anna. Nice to meet you again. I have a question concerning the quotas, because I want to know, what do you think about binding quotas when it comes to public money? Do you think this, in your opinion, that will work, or?
Are you asking me, or are you asking everyone here? I think that if you use the method of quotas, you have a lot of things to clear up. You really have to define and communicate why, and what you have to communicate is the problem. Exactly what you were talking about, Barbara, this, monitoring. This is the problem. We have all the facts here. This is why we have these quotas. It's not, so if you just use quotas without having a lot of work being done in explaining why and the problem behind it, that we actually, what usually works is that when men realize that there are already quotas around, but they are sort of normalized. This kind of discourse that might help, that it's not that you actually introduce a new thing, you try to change the quotas that are already in place. And of course, this takes an understanding, again, that there are inequalities that we would like to change.
Going back to the German industry and what we have heard from you all, what are the challenges, and also what Anna told us from Sweden, I think it's pretty much copy-paste with the power structures and these things across countries, across borders. What do you all see as possible next steps in the industry? Is there something you would challenge colleagues or other organizations, institutions, lawmakers? And do you see there's possibility to really create this like from an activist level and from the organizations, or do you think it's rather necessary that it's really becoming a very specific kind of law, because otherwise it will like take so much time to implement really sustainable change? So do you have any external advisors in your organizations, or do you have any kind of let's say action plan where you say, okay, this is great, this is where we are, and this is already way beyond where we have been, and now this is what we want to accomplish over the next, I don't know, next time frame of couple of years, for example? Do you have any plans or any ideas, or where do you get your inspiration from? Mariette, would you like?
Yeah, well, as you know, for the Berlinale, the biggest change just happened 1.5 years ago when the state minister for culture, who is a woman, sort of decided to do a co-heading of the Berlinale, a female and a male person, which was a quite major change. Yeah. So I do think women who have power and who are aware of the situation and who want to change things can change things by doing so, by acting. I myself have a person working together with me on the budget and the organization. She's also female. I'd rather think creating awareness and talking about it, making people aware all the time how the situation is, also can bring changes which work in a positive way. I'm not sure if one can really change the law in that sense. That means that a lot of people would have to agree on changing the law, and that might be one of the toughest things to achieve.
Thank you very much. Margrit, may I?
Yeah, for me, the interesting thing was an article, I think it was years ago, and in Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and it said, what are doing the female directors after their first film? And I thought, that's it. And we as Seastar want to find those first-time directors and helping them to get a second one made. And we have many nominees, first-time directors. And then I see one had at the time when she had her first film, a baby, and then the decision is to take care of the family. And I would like to find a solution helping those directors in those decisions, in not losing the contact, being seen even if you have a family, because for example, Sonja Maria Gröner received the Seastar 2018 for Sommerhäuser, and that was the time she decided to have a break. And that was for me interesting, because I thought it's great, but at the same time, a guy wouldn't do that. You are so highly acclaimed for your first film, you try to find a second one. And then she decided, she's now doing a lot of things, but she made a break and did writing and did other things which fit better to her family situation. I would like to find out what can we do to help to get second films made. And what I liked of my fellow founder, Claudia Tronier, was that all those first-time directors, male and female, but many female, was introduced from Das kleine Fernsehspiel to the other divisions of ZDF. And I thought that's a great idea, because I understand that if you have a series which is expensive, you need to find a good solution. And I share your point of view, Barbara, that's really, it's a question of risk. And if that person already did a kleines Fernsehspiel and maybe was then at Berlinale and was seen, then it's a better situation to get a second film made. I think there are some of them are not seen because they made great things, and then they have other things to do. And that's for me an interesting issue. And I think you need to encourage big organizations working on that subject. I'm not sure, I think it's not possible by law, but for example, the catch-up situation for German films and series and European films and series was really changed a lot due to law. So it's very simple. If I buy a film, an American film with Liam Neeson, it's not in the Mediathek. If I buy a film, a European film, it's in the Mediathek, which makes it interesting to me to buy that. I can't change that Liam Neeson is a big star and maybe so much stronger than others. But the whole structure changed for me the situation. And I try to find out whether changing small elements of structure could help to encourage to make the situation better.
Okay, thank you very much. So structural challenges again and change needed. Karin, you have initiated further studies to be made and to see where is the journey going, what can be done and even more accelerated. So would you like to tell us a bit about that, what you are currently researching?
Yeah, and I would even go a step back, because what we did after the first study that was published in 2017, we looked at the, what the issues were and what the solutions are. And we actually compiled back then together with Maya Götz in a kind of a crowdsourcing project with all the partners. We compiled a list of all the different possible solutions, what could be done, addressing the different areas that I talked about earlier. And so we've been using that whenever someone comes up and says, "Oh, but what can we do about it?" We can say, "Okay, these are all the things that you can do." And you addressed does there have to be a law, and certain aspects could possibly be changed with the law if there is sufficient political will. In other areas, it's a different type of action that is needed, and so we are trying to address all these different levels and to support and give input, wherever there is an opportunity. So, for instance, what we did back then, because looking at the future, if we want to have different representation on screen in the future. For us, an obvious thing to do was to work with the film schools, because the next generation of filmmakers, if they come into their work with more awareness around diversity, about representation, with an understanding about stereotypes, and with an understanding how important it is to tell different stories and to not always kind of default towards the same thing that has been considered, the genius thing to do over the last however many years. So we've been working with the German film schools, which actually already back in 2018 at Berlinale signed a joint statement of commitment with 15 very concrete commitments for more gender equality and diversity in the schools. And this has been an ongoing work of making sure that the commitments are implemented. And we just had the first kind of an interim monitoring this year at Berlinale, where the film schools presented where they are and what their next steps are, etc. So that is one thing. Then we work with the partners that contributed to the first study, with the broadcasting companies, with production companies, with the film funders, to look at what are the things that need to happen. And we've been invited to give trainings to help kind of raise the awareness of the commissioning editors, the script writers, etc., to gain more sensitivity on these issues and to find ways on how to get more, have more awareness in their decision-making process. So again, not to default to the same, what they've been doing in the past. And currently this year, a follow-up study is underway to the one from 2016. And with this, so the same, or actually it will be even more extensive than the previous one. It will go more in depth on also on ethnic diversity, on disability, on sexual orientation. And with the data that we will then have next year on on-screen representation, we will also look at the different measures that have been taken in the meantime, and whether we can see any correlation between the measures that have been taken by the different broadcasting companies, for instance, and the film funders, and what the actual content on screen is. So next summer will be an interesting time for us to take stock of what actually happened, and then to see what will be the next steps, what else is needed.
Thank you very much, Karin. I have a last question for Anna. So do you recommend external impulses for internal change management?
What do you mean exactly by that question?
Do you think it's helpful if organizations are consulting with advisors who have nothing to do with the organization? Okay. Or is it something where the organizations are very well prepared mostly to have that process initiated from within and also implemented?
I think it's very helpful because I had a research project where we had two different industries, the film industry, but also people working in the steel industry and making, completely different. But the thing is that what they learned from each other was that there were so many similarities, but there were also differences, and they could see them more clearly what it was. So I think it's very good to have this kind of mirroring in someone else. And of course you can have that by inviting someone from externally, from inside. I mean, most industries are convinced that we are so special. We are so special. We cannot compare with any other, and this is very similar. So that was something that they could find out and laugh about. So I think that's definitely a good idea. And also I think it's interesting to think about behind the camera and in front of the camera. That's also an inspiring way to think ahead. I think that it raises different kinds of problems, but also misunderstandings around that. Maybe a lot of women think that they are supposed to do a specific kind of films and only them. Not that it's this kind of perspective that could be on anything or any genre, or etc. So I think that there's also a bit to be discussed there, to open up and not to feel so obliged to do a certain thing as women film director, for instance. And behind the camera, I think there's a lot to do when it comes to the work environment in filmmaking. In some respects, I think it's a bit old-fashioned compared to other industries. That's very hierarchical and kind of very harsh attitude a lot of the times. And as we could see in Me Too, that it's quite common with harassment, sexual harassment, etc., etc. And that is a big problem that has to be not forgotten now, to work with the culture, the work culture, that it becomes more inclusive and more respectful to all the different kind of persons that are involved behind the camera. So that I think would be, that's a big challenge also, as the teams continuously change, and people are very dependent on getting the new, the next job, etc. So it's a tricky situation.
Thank you very much. So time has moved on. I would like to conclude this panel and thank you very, very much for your time and your inspiring insights and sharing that with us. So thanks for your contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.